You're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. Fresh Hell contains stories of a disturbing and often graphic nature and is intended for a mature audience. Please don't let your kids listen to this, or they might turn out like us.
Have you ever found yourself reading the Wikipedia synopsis of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre because you're too scared to watch it for yourself, but you're just so curious? What about The Conjuring?
In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to reveal yourself!
I can't even imagine how anyone can watch this movie.
Each week on Too Scary Didn't Watch, we recap horror films for all the scaredy cats out there, with help from special guests like armchair experts Monica Padman.
The Ring is the movie that I remember being like, I can hardly contain, I'm so scared.
A funny feeling host, Betsy Sidaro.
It's my favorite thing to just scream horror movie plots at people.
We love it. It's our favorite thing too.
It's so much fun.
New episodes of Too Scary Didn't Watch are released every Wednesday and are available wherever you get your podcasts or at tooscarydidn'twatch.com.
Hi, I'm Annie, the American host.
And I'm Johanna, your Austrian host, and you are listening to Fresh Hell, your favorite international podcast. And you just heard the promo for Too Scary Didn't Watch, which is the perfect podcast for all of you who can't make it through an entire horror movie, from newer films to real horror classics like The Poltergeist. Go give them a listen. I think that's right up your alley.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds like my kind of show. So I'm going to check it out. Thank you so much to all of our Hellions out there. We so appreciate you. We would especially like to thank Ariana Jose, Stephanie Erdman, thank you so much, and Marg Tomnay. I don't know if it's Tomnay or Tomney. Tomnay. Thank you very much. We are just so grateful, and we're very sorry we missed you last week. It's one of these things where it's just the two of us on our little show. There's no one else doing editing or producing or any of that. It's just the two of us, and we're 6 hours apart, and turns out it is possible for us both to be under the weather during the same 48-hour window that we had to record last week. Yeah, we're really sorry if we disappointed you.
We were disappointed too. We often try to have at least one episode recorded in advance, but that just didn't work out this time. But no worries, we're feeling better, both of us. We're on top of our game again this week, and we're glad to be back.
Yeah, that's right. It's weird when we don't talk also, because this is sort of the only time we talk is when we record. Yeah. So I missed you, yeah. Did we have any other business? What else is happening?
Yes, I just want to mention once more, thank you to all of you who message us telling us that they are actually one of the 10,000 listeners chosen to vote for the final round of the People's Choice Podcast Awards. And thank you for voting for us. I think the awards will be on 30th of September, and I think voting is going to be another 12 days or something like that. So yeah, that's very exciting. Keep your fingers crossed, people.
Yes, definitely. Also, if you can hear, it sounds, now listen, I'm in the new space in my house, which is our tiny office. It's like, maybe 8 by 10, 8 by 8. It's small. It's cozy, but it sounds like an armada of heavy artillery vehicles has just pulled up outside the house. So I don't know if somebody's having tree work done or if it's all going to stop in a moment, but if you hear any weird noises, that's something's happening outside. I don't think it's as exciting as it sounds. It's probably like repaving a driveway or trimming a tree, but there's a noise all of a sudden. All right, it's going to be fine.
All right, so what fresh hell do you have for us today?
Well, today we're going to be talking about the murder of a pregnant woman. That is always a hard topic, so if it's a particularly difficult one for you and you'd rather skip it, we understand. My sources for this episode are, as usual, papers of the time. Also, a lot of information from Craig Brandon. He's got a book, Murder in the Adirondacks, which I will link to. There was also a really excellent article on Medium.com by Heather Monroe. Her piece on the murder I just really wish I'd found it before I'd read all those original newspaper sources with the blurry tiny font. I generally read all of those using newspapers.com, if you're wondering, and I used family information from Find a Grave. There was another great article for NewYorkUpstate.com by Chuck D'Imperio. All of these sources and more will be listed in our Facebook group albums. So, Grace Mae Brown was born on March 20th, 1886, in South Otselic, New York. I believe that's the correct pronunciation. Otselic. I looked it up. I think it's considered upstate, although if you look at a map of New York, it sort of looks like it's right in the middle of the state, but I think anything north of the city is upstate. I'm not entirely sure how New York works. Somebody's going to let us know for sure. But her parents were Betsy Minerva Babcock Brown and Frank B. Brown. They were a lovely couple, and they were married in July of 1878. Funnily enough, I did a quick trace on her father's side, and they were pretty early settlers of New York and New England, and they had come from Worcester in England, where a lot of my family live. I just thought that was interesting to a tiny, tiny percentage of the people listening. Anyhow, they were a happy family, close family. They owned a dairy farm. Grace was the middle child of 9. She had 4 older and 4 younger siblings. I think it was 6 girls and 3 boys, but not 100%. She was said to not only be very attractive, but also very smart, and she seems to have been very witty as well. She attended school longer than any of her siblings until she was 16 years old. The area of New York State where they lived was and still is a small town, with dairy farming having been the main source of income for its residents. There were about 1,200 people living in South Otselic when the Brown family lived there around 1900, and there are around 1,000 people there today, so the population really hasn't changed very much. I think it's still very rural. Grace worked on the farm with her family, where she went to school, and had the nickname Billy.
Okay, I'm intrigued because there must be a story there.
There is, yeah. So as I said, she seemed to be really bright and kind of spunky and fun. She apparently loved the song Bill Bailey, Won't You Please Come Home, which had come out in 1902 when she was 16 years old. She loved the song so much that I think she was sort of singing it all the time and started to go by the name Billy. She sort of created that nickname for herself. And she just loved music and singing and dancing and really loved to go to any kind of musical performance that she could possibly attend. And then interestingly, Billy also occasionally used the term the kid because she was also very interested in the story of Billy the Kid.
She actually seems like she could be friends with us.
Right.
She seems to have been going down several rabbit holes there.
Yeah, exactly. And so there are letters from her where she signs them the kid. You know, totally sounds like our kind of people. So, as I said, she finished school when she was 16, and after that, she worked as a farmhand for a short time on a neighboring farm, decided pretty quickly that that was not the sort of work she wanted to continue with, which that is hard work, so I cannot blame her. She decided that she would rather work in a factory. So she went to Cortland, New York, where she would live with her older married sister. She loved Cortland, unlike the rural farming community where she was sort of raised and had been used to. In Cortland, there was a shop-lined street, there was a dance hall. She was absolutely thrilled to be living there. And initially, she helped to look after her newborn nephew, but she would soon find work at a skirt factory. The owner of the skirt factory was a man by the name of Noah Horace, or N.H. Gillette. I did not have the time to go down this rabbit hole, nor did I want to make this a 2-hour special on things no one cares about, but Gillette is a really common name here in Boston. It is the headquarters of the razor company, Gillette Razors. But there are also a lot of really prominent New England names within this family tree, like place names and just, I think there must be a connection to the Gillettes in New York State, but I didn't do the genealogy and I'm not sure. Doesn't really matter, except some of these names are going to sound familiar. Okay, so Noah Gillette, he owned the skirt factory in Cortland, and he was the uncle of Chester Gillette. And so now we're going to discuss Chester. His full name was Chester Ellsworth Gillette. He was born in August of 1883, so he's 3 years older than Grace. And he was born in Montana to parents Frank and Louisa Gillette. They were a middle-class, working-class family and deeply, deeply religious. They moved to Spokane, Washington when Chester was 3, and they really seemed to prosper there. His father would own a hotel, among other businesses that were doing really well. But unfortunately, in 1889, there was a fire that just utterly destroyed Spokane, Washington. And bizarrely, so this was another rabbit hole I did not fall down. I'm proud of myself, but it seems like when the water supply failed when they were trying to fight this fire, and it was the fire that was like in the business district. And so it seems like officials in the area decided to start using dynamite to destroy neighboring buildings, hoping to stop the fire from spreading. So like as a fire break. So you've got this huge fire going, and then shit's just exploding all over the place, and it didn't work. The entire downtown was totally destroyed. And then the fire ended up having to burn itself out. Literal nightmare fuel. Miraculously, the one source I looked this up on was correct, only one person died in this just absolute clusterfuck of a conflagration. But yeah, the Gillette family, it was really devastating for them because they lost everything. They lost all the businesses, all their money, all their possessions. They were completely destitute. They had nothing and they were homeless. And I'm not sure if the Salvation Army helped them out after the fire, but we do know that in 1892, they themselves joined the Salvation Army. And according to Wikipedia, quote, "The Salvation Army is a Christian church and international charitable organization. The organization reports a worldwide membership of over 1.7 million, consisting of soldiers, officers, and adherents collectively known as Salvationists." End quote. So most Americans will recognize them as the people around Christmas time with the red kettle, and they sort of ring a bell outside a door. There's also a lot of Salvation Army thrift shops. They're also very big on converting people, and they structure their organization like the military. His parents were very devout, as I said, and apparently young Chester would often accompany his mother to prisons where she would try to convert prisoners, which sounds like a super fun and healthy way to spend your childhood. But the family, it seems, were really good at converting both the murderers and non-murdery folk alike. And because they were so good at what they did, they were sort of sent all around the country to various cities and states, mostly out west, the Midwest, also even Hawaii. And they were sent all over the place to convert people. Chester, it seems, didn't love all the moving or all the converting, I don't think. The reason I say that is that there is a family photo. And in the family photo, his parents and his siblings are all wearing the uniform of the Salvation Army. But something I read pointed out that I hadn't noticed, but he's wearing a 3-piece suit. He's not wearing the uniform that they're all wearing. So I feel like that's kind of a little bit telling, but who can say? It was around this time that his uncle Noah, who owns the skirt factory, steps in. And he offers to pay for his nephew Chester to attend Oberlin. And I don't know if the name Oberlin rings a bell to anybody. It's a very prestigious and progressive place. And this is a really serious gift from his uncle to pay for his college education. And when I say progressive, I've said this sort of off the top of my head, but I believe Oberlin was one of the first places to allow Black students and female students. I think it was, exceptionally progressive for the time. So this is huge. This is a real gift to have, anyone come in and offer to pay for your higher education. And his first year there, he did great. And during that summer, he worked for his uncle at the skirt factory. His second year at university did not go so well. On the upside, he was made the captain of the newly formed basketball team, and he really enjoyed that. But he had sort of stopped trying academically, and his grades plummeted, and I think he was sort of failed out. He was, brace yourself, more interested in flirting with girls and playing basketball than he was in his university studies. I know. It's
shocking.
Take a minute and just, it's a shocker. So after the fall semester of his second year, Chester left Oberlin and never went back. I think he failed out, but not 100% sure, and I might just be mean. It's fine. He doesn't deserve. You'll see. Meanwhile, his father had gotten really ill when they were stationed in Hawaii, and he never really recovered from his illness, and he was sort of weak and had health problems for the rest of his life. And because of that, his family left the Salvation Army. They were like, well, they didn't save him. So they moved along. They still believed in God, though, and so they found another religious group to join in the hopes that Frank would be healed, and this one was even more extreme. Like, I think they moved on to a commune. Chester seems to have not been impressed by any of this, and in 1903, he moves to Chicago. He's doing some kind of job. In 1904, Uncle Noah again goes to visit him and apparently forgives him for flunking out of Oberlin and wasting all of the money and opportunity that he had offered him. And he not only forgave him, but he offered him a full-time job at the skirt factory back in upstate New York, which Chester accepted.
I still think it's so funny to own a skirt factory.
I know.
I mean, I get it, but nowadays you wouldn't have just a skirt factory, you know what I mean?
You would make... Yeah.
Dresses... all kinds of clothing items. I'm sure they just produced like 2 models of skirts.
Yes. In 2 sizes. Are you olive oil sized? How tight is your corset? Yeah, so his move was even reported in the Cortland Standard, and they printed the following in their personal column, which I just kind of love. So this is from the Cortland Standard, which was a newspaper, and it says, quote, Chester Gillette of Chicago, Illinois, has entered the employ of the Gillette Skirt Company and is at present making his home with his uncle, N.H. Gillette, period, end quote. I don't know if this has come up in other cases that we've covered, but very often when you're reading these old newspapers and searching for a name and then, reading all the hits in old newspaper, you find these really funny things that they print. Like, it's really common to see things like Miss Mary Smith has returned from a visit to the neighboring town where she stayed with her sister for a week and a half and had a lovely time. Like, people just literally printed whatever. I guess it was like the Facebook of the time. I have a copy of my great uncle. He was the Jesuit priest that was called in during the Coconut Grove fire to give last rites. I have the announcement in the paper that he was joining the seminary. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. These days you only would pay for things like engagement or wedding or obituaries. And that's kind of, I don't think people, unless Page 6 would cover it, right? But for your normal people, no.
I only ever saw that in old newspapers from the US. Also, announcing engagements, I've never seen that being done here. Or like you have these social pages, right? In the newspaper. Yeah, we don't have that. I don't know. I don't think here even the tiniest local newspaper would print this early day Facebook status kind of news.
It's just weird. It's like fascinating and boring at the same time, which doesn't happen that often. You know what I mean? It's like, this is fascinating, and also I don't care about any of it. It's just an entire column of just, wow. Yeah. So anyway, it's there at the factory in 1905 that Grace meets Chester, and she would have been around 19. He would have been about 22. They are both very attractive. And the factory girl, she's the sort of girl he'd been warned wasn't good enough for the family. And she, of course, was falling for the very handsome, charming, well-traveled young man who was sort of working as the foreman. And they saw each other first at work. They'd share lunch sometimes, and then he would visit her at her sister's house, where they weren't really always closely chaperoned. And I'm not casting any shade on the sister. Grace was a respected adult. But over time, Chester had moved out of his uncle's home. His uncle seemed just like a super nice guy, married, children of his own, but still was trying to help his nephew. You know what I mean? So once Chester had enough money from the job he'd been given, he found his own place, which I'm sure he also wanted his own freedom. And then sadly, Grace's sister's son, her nephew that she had helped care for, he actually passed away on September 11th, 1905, when he was only 2 years old. But, again, really common for the time. And after that happened, her sister and brother-in-law decided to move. They didn't want to be in that same house. And so Grace found a room to rent that was close to the factory where she worked. So Grace thought that she had fallen in love with the man of her dreams, but meanwhile, Chester was slowly but surely moving up in society. And so he was now going out with a cousin of his more frequently, and then the cousin had friends from the right kinds of family. You know what I mean? So he's now spending more time with more wealthy, connected young ladies, the sort of girls his family would approve of. It does seem like Grace was aware that this was happening, and it did make her jealous. And it also seems, moreover, that her friends were good friends and had warned her. They were like, listen, I know that you are crazy about him, but we have seen him flirting with a lot of women, and we know he's taken so-and-so out. But he would just always reassure Grace that nothing was happening. They were seeing things that weren't there, of course. And she believed what she wanted to believe. And again, not casting shade. This is how things go for everybody, you know? And she still was having a hard time with it, though. And if she seemed especially jealous, she had reason to be, because in the spring of 1906, Grace realized that she was pregnant with Chester's child. He kept putting off important conversations, and his behavior toward her immediately cooled, which is exactly what you want to have happen when someone gets you pregnant. But he urged her to go home to her family, and he was going to work out what to do, and he would take care of everything. And she loved him and really felt sure that he was going to sort everything out and marry her, and she was wrong.
Okay, after all I've heard so far, I'm not that surprised, to be honest, which means I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could all see where this one was going. And Now listen, I should also note, to be completely fair, that some of the sources you read about the case at the time imply that maybe Grace had set her sights on her employer's wealthy nephew and had tried to seduce him and then trap him with a pregnancy. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. But it doesn't really matter, because we know that it takes two to tango, so to speak, right? And both parties were old enough to know the consequences of their actions. And it bothers me that young women are just ruined.
Yes, they're old enough. Yes, they are. But I mean, there was no
sex education.
There was no sex education, and you were not really prepared for this kind of relationships before marriage. You know what I mean?
Absolutely not. Yep, I do know what you mean. I do. And I think also, I was kind of surprised the first time I read one of the things saying that maybe she had set her sights on her employer's nephew, because why wouldn't she? I mean, of course she would. If they work together, he makes a good income, he's handsome, he's nice to her. I mean, why wouldn't she? It doesn't mean that she's a gold digger. You know what I mean? I don't know. It just bothers me that over and over again, we tell these stories where young women are just ruined by pregnancy out of wedlock, but the men are equally responsible, and there's never any repercussions for them at all. So one of the other young women that he was apparently interested in was a pretty young girl from the right kind of family, and her name was Harriet Benedict. There was a book loosely based on this case called An American Tragedy, and it was written by Theodore, I don't know if it's Dreiser or Dreiser. I've not read it. And that book was turned into a movie with Elizabeth Taylor playing Harriet, and that was called A Place in the Sun.
Oh, I know that movie. Yeah.
I've not seen it. Everything I read, though, indicates that this would maybe make more sense to you. So there's a lot of articles that talk about how Harriet's role in real life was very, very different than A Place in the Sun, than the film. While, yes, they were often out with the same group of young friends and they would see each other socially, but it seems that he'd only taken Harriet on a date, maybe two. And while I wouldn't be surprised if he was hoping to maybe win her over and also keep Grace on the side, it seems like nothing ever happened romantically between Chester and Harriet. They did go to the lake for a day once, and we've actually got a photograph of Chester that was taken by Harriet on this day out. It was found in his camera after everything that I'm about to tell you about. Back then, you really rationed your film, right? I think the important thing is none of this had anything to do with Harriet, really, except to say she was one of several girls I think Chester probably had an eye on in his circle of friends, right? And then the other thing I read is that in the film, Harriet is gorgeous and played by Elizabeth Taylor, but that the girl who plays Grace is sort of a plain Jane in the movie. But in real life, they're both beautiful. Grace is beautiful and very intelligent. Yeah. Back to real life out of the movie. Chester convinces Grace that she should head home and he's going to work everything out and he'll be in touch when everything is sorted. And this part is a little bit tricky because I think Grace believed he was working out a way for them to be married as soon as possible, as soon as he saved up the money that they'd need. And so Grace wrote to him every day while she was home, and she's hiding her pregnancy. And we do have one letter that was printed in the anthology Letters of the Century. And a little bit of background, as I understand it, Chester had said he would visit her for the 4th of July holiday, but instead, that's the day he ended up at the lake with Harriet and some friends instead, while Grace stayed home with her family. She wrote him every single day, and she wrote letters saying how she couldn't stop crying, how she wished she were dead, how it breaks her heart not to tell her mother why she's so upset. She says she believes that he will make everything right. There are other letters apparently where she then threatens to tell everybody what he's done. Then she writes letters saying that she loves him. We have all of these letters, and they are actually published. I just could not find a copy. There's a used copy on Amazon for like $200. So all I have is this one, but while some people see this as her being really very unstable, I actually think this sounds completely normal from someone her age and in her situation. Do you know what I mean?
I can't make a qualified statement about this right now, as I don't know the content of those daily letters.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that she apparently threatened him. And the mention that she wants to be dead, which can give the idea that she was kind of unstable or depressed. But of course, I do understand the pressure she must have felt given the times and how, as you perfectly said before, a pregnancy out of wedlock would basically ruin her. So yes, while I'm not in favor of this kind of description you just gave me, I can totally understand where she was coming from. I mean, she's 19 years old. She's hiding a pregnancy from her whole family, and she's basically waiting for the man to do what's right. Yeah. Do what's right is such a horrible thing to say. Sorry, but nowadays, thank God we come from the privileged situation where you don't have to get married just because you have a kid. But back then, it would have been to do what's right. You know what I mean?
Yes. And my understanding too, yes, is that this all happened. This wasn't over like a couple of weeks. This is over 3 months where she is home with her family. You know what I mean? And I think it started out as letters, I love you, I trust you, everything's going to be fine. And then he'd just ignore her. He'd just completely ignore her.
And that it's spiraling.
Yeah. And so then the tone would change to more desperation, begging. And then I think it was more of a, listen, you have to write to me. If you keep cutting me out, I'm going to tell people what's happening. And then you're going to have to deal with it. I think it was that kind of thing. All fair. I think all fair. But again, I never got to read everything, so I don't know for sure. But yeah, I just think it was... I can't imagine how hard it must have been for her, especially being ignored by him. And the only way you could get in touch was letters, right? So she's writing every day and just nothing from him. What we have here is the last letter that Grace wrote to Chester, and it details some of the very complicated plans that they finally made. So he did write back. They came up with a plan. This is the letter that she then wrote to him. So this was dated July 5th, 1906. Postmarked 2 p.m. on July 6th, and it was trial exhibit number 22, and it says, quote, Thursday night. My dear Chester, I am curled up by the kitchen fire, and you would shout if you could see me. Everyone else is in bed. The girls came up, and we shot the last firecrackers. Our lawn looks as green as the Cortlandt House corner. I will tell you all about my 4th when I see you. I hope you had a nice time. This is the last letter I can write, dear. I feel as though you are not coming. Perhaps this is not right, but I cannot help feeling I am never going to see you again. How I wish this was Monday. I am going down to stay with Maud next Sunday night, dear, and then go to De Ruyter the next morning, and will get there about 10 o'clock. If you take the 9:45 train from the Lehigh there, you will get there about 11. I'm sorry I could not go to Hamilton, dear, but Papa and Mama did not want me to go, and there are so many things I have had to work hard for in the last 2 weeks. They think I am just going out there to De Ruyter for a visit. Now, dear, when I get there, I will go at once to the hotel, and I don't think I will see any of the people. If I do, and they ask me to come to the house, I will say something so they won't mistrust anything. Tell them I have a friend coming from Cortlandt, and that we were to meet there to go to a funeral or wedding in some town further on. Awfully stupid, but we were invited to come, and so I had to cut my vacation a little short and go. Will that be all okay, dear? Maybe that won't be just what I will say, but don't worry about anything, for I shall manage somehow. Only I want you to come in the morning. I don't want to wait there in the hotel, for if they should see me there, and all day, they would think it funny I did not go to the house. You must come in the morning, for I have had to make you don't know how many plans to fit your last letter in order to meet you Monday. Monday. I dislike waiting until Monday, but now that I have, I don't think anything only fair that you should come up Monday morning. But dear, you must see the necessity yourself of getting there and not making me wait. If you dislike the idea of coming Monday, you can get the train up there Sunday night and be there to meet me. Perhaps that would be the best way. All I care is that I don't want to wait there all day or for half a day. I think there is a train that leaves the Lehigh at 6-something Sunday night. I don't know what I would do if you were not there or did not come. I am about crazy now. I have been bidding goodbye to some places today. There are so many nooks, dear, and all of them so dear to me. I have lived here nearly all my life. First I said goodbye to the spring house with its great masses of green moss, then the apple tree where we had our playhouse, then the beehive, a cute little house in the orchard, and of course all of the neighbors that have mended my dresses from a little tot up to save me a thrashing I really deserved. Oh, dear, you don't realize what all of this is to me. I know I shall never see any of them again. And Mamma, great heavens, how I do love Mamma. I don't know what I shall do without her. She is never cross and always helps me so much. Sometimes I think if I could tell Mamma, but I can't. She has trouble enough as it is, and I couldn't break her heart like that. If I come back dead, perhaps she does not know she won't be angry with me. I will never be happy again, dear. I wish I could die. You will never know what you have made me suffer, dear. I miss you and want to see you, but I wish I could die. I am going to bed now, dear. Please come, and don't let me wait there. It is for both of us to be there. If you had made plans for something, and then she wrote, and think, but crossed it out. Sunday night you, and she underlines, must come Monday morning. Please think, dear, that I had to give up a whole summer's pleasure, and you will surely be brave enough to give up one evening for me. I shall expect and look for you Monday forenoon. Heaven bless you until then. Lovingly and with kisses, the Kid. I will go right to the Tabor house, and you come for me there. I wish you could come up Sunday night so as to be there, and sweetheart, I think it would be easier for you. Please come up Sunday night, dear. So that's the end of her last letter to him. There's a lot there.
There's a lot to unpack here. So she says goodbye to basically everything in her life.
Mm-hmm.
So she expected never to return, which means she either thought they're gonna run off and get married, but then she could return if she got married to a young man from a higher class, higher social circle.
She could, yes. I think that would have been okay.
I wonder if people thought that maybe she was suicidal because of this letter.
Yes, I think there was some questioning that. I think, personally, the I wish I could die is just I don't see it as suicidal so much. And then the aspect where she says missing her mother and if she should die, I think that might be in reference to, so there were two things I think that she thought might happen and two things that they had sort of discussed. And one of them, I think we get into this a little bit more later, but one was of course that they would be married and everything would be fine. But the other option was also that she might go to a home for unwed mothers and that he would sort of spirit her away. And then I think her fear is that if she dies in childbirth, she just doesn't want her mother to know that she was pregnant out of wedlock. That was the impression that I got, but there's a lot there to sort of...
And there was not the possibility that they ever talked about getting her an illegal abortion?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so, but it's absolutely possible.
Because I'm just thinking of the rumors in the Dorothy Arnold disappearance.
Of course. I mean, anything would be possible. I would have thought if she wanted an illegal abortion, she would have done it sooner. But it's certainly possible, but not really an issue here, no.
Yeah, okay.
So on July 8th, 1906, the couple left their homes and they were going to meet up in DeRuyter, which was a village about 20 miles from Cortland, and it was even closer to where Grace lived. And they decided that they'd meet at a local hotel and then go from there. Chester had apparently packed like what you imagine to be an old-fashioned suitcase, like a briefcase-style suitcase, right, with a couple of changes of clothes, and then he had his camera, and then strapped to the outside of his suitcase were his umbrella and his tennis racket. And people noticed this. People saw him. This was like, everybody reported that he was seen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Grace, it seems, had packed like everything. Everything she owned was packed up in this trunk. And I think her family just thought she was visiting with a friend But again, she was an adult who'd never really given them any reason to worry. So she could have said, I'm going to go stay with so-and-so for a few weeks and have a little holiday. And they would have said, great, we'll see you in a few weeks. Write us, you know. I think she was just really trying to prevent anyone from knowing she was on a trip with a man while being unmarried. And I think he was trying not to be seen with her on account of the plans he'd made to murder her. So you tell me what you think when this is all done.
Okay, and as I said, so she either thought, or she probably thought that Chester was going to marry her.
Yeah,
still.
I think so. Either marry her or, like, worst case, get her to a home for unwed mothers where she could, you know. I really do think she thought that they were going to get married. I wish I didn't think that, but I do. In any case, they apparently had several close calls with running into people that they knew. It seems like there was this really complicated game of, like, hiding and waiting. So, like, he'd be on a train, but, there's someone they know on the train. And so they intentionally miss the next train and separate and take different trains and meet at the next station. This sort of, you know, cat and mouse stuff. And knowing what we know about Grace, I just feel like some of this would have been almost exciting.
I think that's something that would have been exciting for most young women at the time. I mean, come up with sneaky plans to meet with the person you love. I can see this as a thrill for many young women, or young people in general.
Exactly. And I think in the letter where she talks about the people and running into the people, that's the only other thing I feel like I should mention is just, it's exactly what happened. They did keep running into people that knew them, because remember, these are all relatively small towns and not that far apart. So by the time Chester and Grace finally arrived in Utica, they ended up having to spend the night there at the Martin Hotel. So Chester checked into the hotel as Charles Gordon. He used an alias, and he had to be careful with his alias because, of course, he had a monogrammed suitcase. And he also never paid the bill when they left the following day. He sounds great. Grace was amazed by Utica. Apparently, it was a city with 60,000 people, and it was the biggest city she, I was going to say, had ever seen, but also would ever see. And like I said, yeah, they had to spend so much time avoiding people that they knew that by the time they arrived, they did spend the night together at that hotel. It used to be on Bleecker Street, the Martin. It's not there anymore, I don't think. But a lot of sources mention that this is actually probably, despite her being, you know, over 4 months pregnant, this is probably the first time they've actually spent a whole night together.
Sure. Even if she was living in her own room, usually male visit was not allowed.
Of course. Yep.
Yeah, you didn't want to cause a scandal. Exactly.
Yep. So the next morning, they got another train, and this one was bound for Tupper Lake. But once they arrived, this I thought was sort of interesting because everything you read is like, well, they arrived at Tupper Lake, and they just didn't like it very much. It just didn't have the views they were expecting. So they talked to the hotel owner where they were supposed to stay. And I guess the hotel owner was like, well, I think you should get back on the train and go to this other place, which I think will be more to your liking. It just seems so weird to me, right? Like, I've been to hotels and thought to myself, this wasn't what I was expecting, but I still spent the money because I made the reservation and stayed in the disappointing place. They were redirected and they made their way to, I love the name of this lake. It's called Big Moose Lake. I need to get Moose to Big Moose Lake. I feel like that needs to happen. And so they set off again and they stay at the Glenmore, which is the most secluded resort on Big Moose Lake. And this is a really beautiful area, the Adirondacks area of upstate New York. It's quiet, lots of really beautiful, picturesque lakes. It's still not like a really overdeveloped area. It's still just beautiful, really rural, rustic, pretty. So Grace has got her huge trunk. I think she left it at the train station for safekeeping. You know, you don't want to keep schlepping it around if you're going to keep leaving hotels to find better hotels. But Chester has his smaller little suitcase with his tennis racket and his umbrella. And so they arrive at the Glenmore. And when they arrive, Charles again checks in using an alias. And this time he is now Carl Graham. And Grace just checks in as Grace Brown. I just think it's interesting that he thought of not one, but two different names with CG initials. So we know he's capable of thinking ahead about actions and consequences when it suits him. So that afternoon, Chester decides to rent a rowboat. Oh, so romantic. It's apparently a 17-foot-long rowboat, and he was known to be very good with a canoe. That's not a euphemism. I think that he was into showing off his canoe skills with his wealthy friends when they would go to the lake, like to show him how well he handled an oar.
But how long is a canoe?
Oh, it's, fuck, we just covered this. It's a rod? Isn't a rod approximately the length of one canoe?
Yeah.
I don't think it was a canoe, though. I think it's a rowboat. And I should also mention, more importantly, that Grace does not know how to swim. And we know this because all the letters are out there. I couldn't read them. I can't afford a copy of the out-of-print pamphlets and book that were out there. But apparently, in at least one of the letters, she tells him about how she can't swim. So he knows she can't swim. So into the boat they go, and Chester takes his suitcase with him, which isn't remotely weird, right? So they row the boat out into the beautiful lake, and other people see them, and they're out on the banks of the lake, and they have a picnic. What a lovely couple. And it's the last time anybody but Chester would see her alive. That afternoon, when they did not return with the boat, the hotel proprietor didn't really worry because Big Moose Lake is, well, it's big. It's 3 miles or 4.8 kilometers long and about a mile or 1.6 kilometers wide. It's also pretty deep, ranging from 30 to 70 feet or 9 to 21 meters deep in its deepest parts, but the average depth is about 23 feet or 7 meters. When they didn't come back, the man at the hotel who had rented them the boat and everything, he thought maybe he wasn't really that worried. He thought maybe they just rowed farther than they expected to and it had gotten dark, and so they might have spent the night at another hotel located somewhere else on the lake. But when they didn't arrive the next morning for breakfast, he got a few men together to search for them. And unfortunately, they found the overturned and drifting boat, and in the water, not too far from the boat, they found Grace's lifeless body. The following is from the Barrie Times, Barrie, Vermont, July 13th, 1906. Quote, "One body recovered, Miss Grace Brown and Carl Graham drowned in Adirondacks. Utica, New York, July 12th. The body of Miss Grace Brown was recovered from Big Moose Lake in Adirondacks yesterday afternoon. The lake is still being dragged for the body of her companion, Carl Graham of Albany. The young people arrived at Big Moose Wednesday, and after registering at the Glenmore Hotel, secured a boat and went out on the lake for a row. At noon yesterday, the boat was found upside down. Efforts are being made to locate the relatives of the couple." End quote.
It's very sad, and I think it's safe to assume that he didn't really drown with her, right?
No, he did not. Nope.
Thought so.
Yeah. After Grace went into the water, by what manner, no one knows for sure, and we'll get into that in a moment. But after Grace went under the water, he seems to have rowed to shore and then flipped the boat over and pushed it out into the lake again. He then took his things and started to make the 6-mile walk through the woods toward another lake and another hotel. A hotel where he had a reservation and plans to meet up with friends under his own name. And I should probably mention that this is the part in my research where I was like, oh, he's a sociopath.
Yeah, that's definitely cold-blooded.
That's a lot of planning. That's the thing. I don't see any way, any reason for him to have given 2 fake names. Do you know what I mean? And then... And interestingly, he ran into a couple of men while he was walking through the woods, which was, I think, a surprise to everyone. Like, nobody expected that during the 6-mile schlep to the other resort. They'd be witnesses later. Chester was in a suit carrying a suitcase, like in the middle of the woods. Also, interestingly, no tennis racket. That had gone missing at some point. In the meantime, the authorities went to Grace's family, who were obviously absolutely devastated, and they asked her family about Carl Graham. And they were told pretty quickly that they had never heard of Carl Graham, but she did know somebody by the name of Chester Gillette, and she had told them that she thought they might be married. So maybe he would be a good person to speak with because maybe he would know this Carl Graham person. So the authorities were after him pretty much immediately, and they're making their way toward Big Moose Lake. And they follow Chester's trail, and they find him pretty quickly up at the Arrowhead Hotel where they arrested him in the lobby. Chester had a lot to say about what had happened. He said she had been suicidal over the pregnancy, and despite his best efforts, she had become absolutely hysterical and just flung herself into the lake, and that he had jumped in after her, but sadly, he just couldn't save her. And the police were like, really? Because she had some damage to her forehead And then he said, oh, she must have hit it when the boat accidentally capsized. We tipped over accidentally and she must have been hit in the head, but I knew she couldn't swim. And so he says he tried to save her, but she was flailing around so much that he had to just swim for the boat and hold on because he couldn't let her drag him down. He did yell at her to grab the boat, though. So, I mean, really, what else could he have done?
Yeah, it's really all that he could have done, and he had tried everything to save her.
Yeah, he's like, grab the boat, and she didn't.
He didn't have to feel bad at all,
Nope.
and then he could willy-nilly march his ass over to spend a lovely week with his friends, and that's a completely normal reaction to seeing a woman pregnant with your child drowning herself right in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
No problem there. It's completely natural behavior.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's absolutely normal. And the police didn't buy it either. They're like, okay, how come your clothes are dry? That was a tricky one. And then they were like, but also your suitcase is here and your camera and all its film are intact. So that's pretty impressive. How'd you keep that from getting damaged when it all went into the water? And he didn't have the answers. And where was the tennis racket? So the authorities believed that Chester had murdered Grace, hitting her over the head with his tennis racket or maybe the oar from the boat, and then thrown her into the water. And that, of course, his motive was to avoid having to settle for fatherhood and marriage to a farm girl. As for the defense, that's kind of an interesting bit of information, and I think also telling. When Chester was arrested, I think he and all of us would initially assume that his uncle or another one of the very wealthy relatives in his family, because there were a lot of very wealthy relatives in his family, that one of them would surely send in a high-priced, high-profile attorney to defend him, right? They did not. They sent him no one. And a lot of people think that their refusal to help was an indication of their belief in his guilt. You know, I think I did also read initially that it was an attorney from Harriet's family, of all people. There was a lot of media speculation, which is probably what inspired the film, but there was a lot of media speculation that Chester had killed Grace so that he could be with Harriet. And so I think her father, I presume, sent an attorney over once he was initially arrested, basically just telling him to keep his fucking trap shut. It was like, just stop talking, because he couldn't stop telling stories and lies.
Yeah. Also, can you imagine you're the father of Harriet,
Yeah.
and she's this girl who met this guy twice,
Right.
probably, and nothing ever happened, and she's a girl from a higher social class, and this is important back then, and you want to keep her name clear from all scandals, and then she gets pulled into this kind of horrible murder.
Exactly.
For no reason at all.
Yeah. And I think she must have been horrified, right? To find out a man.
Of course.
I think they'd gone out on a couple of dates. But as she said, the topic of marriage was never even remotely broached. Like, they were not in any way, I would say, even considered dating. Like, going on one date with someone does not a relationship make.
They were
right?
not there yet.
No.
Yeah.
So she must have been absolutely just gutted to see that this man that she'd gone out with a few times was suddenly accused of murdering his pregnant girlfriend for her, right? I mean, I get why they made the whole thing into a movie, but in reality, I think she was just another victim of Chester's, you know?
So he then was tried with no fancy schmancy lawyer at his side.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's right. He had a public defender who was great. I mean, his public defenders were good, but they didn't have a lot to work with, you know what I mean? The trial started on November 12th, 1906, and it was quite the scene. You know how trials that took place over 100 years ago that are often so sensational in a way that just would never be allowed today, right? We see it all the time. At this trial, all of Grace's letters to Chester were read out loud, and not only were they read, but they were copied and bound into a pamphlet that was sold outside the courthouse as a souvenir. And newspapers of the time talk about how everyone in the courtroom was in tears, sobbing, listening to the recitation of her letters, because she's literally just begging him to do the right thing by her and their child, and that she loves him. And even Chester, I guess, managed to tear every now and then. Again,
For sure.
total sociopath, right? They brought in the actual rowboat. Although I don't think there was a lot of evidence to be gleaned there. I think there was a little bit of hair actually found, like a little of her hair, a strand or two. But there wasn't any. It's not like it was a bloody rowboat or there was any kind of smoking gun there. The other thing that happened, and I really debated whether or not I should even mention this, but I think it's important. I was shocked by it. Skip ahead 30 or 60 seconds maybe if the pregnancy aspects of this case upset you. Okay, so during the trial, the district attorney brought in from the coroner's office the approximately 4-month-old fetus in a jar.
For shock value. That's
Yeah.
the moment in the movie where everybody goes like,
Oh, is it in the movie?
no, I mean, in general, in this kind of,
yes, exactly.
court situations, you always have this moment where the whole courtroom goes,
Yes, exactly. And I think it was very shocking. And ultimately, the thing that I was upset by was just that it was totally unnecessary because the coroner had made a note that Grace was pregnant and she was about 4 months pregnant and Chester admitted to being the father. So there was really no reason to bring the fetus in a jar, right? Except to really shock and anger the jury, which I'm sure it did. The only thing I don't like about it is, of course, the additional grief it must have caused everyone who loved Grace, and there were a lot of people who loved Grace. Just sad.
And aside from that very unnecessary exhibition of a fetus, was there much from the coroner's office in terms of other evidence?
There really wasn't, sadly. It was another problematic investigation from that aspect because by the time the coroner had a chance to perform the autopsy, Grace had been embalmed. Initially, remember, everybody thought it was a terrible boating accident. So I think the coroner did have to go down to the funeral home in order to perform the autopsy, which had sort of... she'd already been embalmed. She did have some bruising around her forehead. There was like a head injuries of some kind. And the defense claimed it was from them poking the body with a pole when they were searching for her and like recovering the body. But of course, the prosecutor says no, he hit her. I think if there was that much damage, he probably hit her with the oar. Maybe first with the tennis racket just to surprise her and then the oar, but... They make a big deal about the tennis racket because it's missing. So, and then there's also some question about whether or not there was water in her lungs. Like, had she maybe been alive but unconscious when she went into the water? There were doctors who testified at the trial that she did not drown, that she died of her head injuries. But if I'm being completely honest, I don't think we really know that for sure.
Yeah.
And the case was entirely circumstantial. I think it's even still studied as a circumstantial evidence case. But I also think that while we'll never know what exactly happened, I just can't see any explanation for all of his actions other than he intended to kill her. Like, nothing else makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the jury agreed. They only deliberated for about 4 hours before finding him guilty of first-degree murder. And he did have good legal representation. It's just, again, what were they going to do against all of that circumstantial evidence? It was sort of a mountain of it. Judge Davendorf sentenced him to die in the electric chair. When he heard the verdict, Chester apparently sent a telegram to his father that simply read, "I am convicted." He was smiling and joking, and that when he was taken back to the prison, well, also when he was first arrested at the Arrow Lodge, whatever, up at that other lake house, when he was first arrested on the train ride back to the prison, wherever he was being arrested and questioned, he was apparently laughing and joking about it the whole way.
That's not our kind of people.
No, he's a Ted Bundy. He's a total sociopath, I think. I really do.
Was he good looking?
He was. He was very good looking. And I really do think that if you're a sociopath, spending your childhood telling murderers that everything's fine as long as they believe in God is probably not the best foundation for your upbringing.
Yeah, I think you've got a point there. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're going to see it kind of come to fruition here. So his family was poor again, and here's what happened. The sensationalism with the press. Apparently, so his family had been involved with another group of real religious extremists, like they were living in a commune somewhere. They'd given up all their worldly possessions. And this was all in a hope that the father would be cured again, right? They couldn't afford to go to his trial. But apparently one of the newspapers hired his mother as a correspondent on the case. And they paid for her to get there, and they paid for her to stay in town during the trial. And then, of course, what this got them were photographs of his devastated, grief-stricken mother watching the trial. And of course, they printed a poem that he wrote for his mother, which it actually wasn't bad. It was a really sweet poem, but I'm not sharing it because this isn't about him. And I do feel bad for his mother. That is her son. That is, it doesn't matter what your children do. You always are going to, you know, I'm not without sympathy there, but Chester can go fuck himself. And they did. They tried to appeal several more times. No luck. He did find Jesus. Surprise, surprise. And he kept a journal. And that was kind of interesting.
Interesting in what way?
Well, so this is another thing where I could only find excerpts of it because I couldn't afford to buy. It's also been published, his journal. But everything you read says that he never admits in the journal any guilt of anything. But he also never says he's innocent. He talks a lot about being angry at the way in which he was caught, but never expresses any remorse. I think he's just salty he got caught.
Yeah, that kind of fits the bill.
Right?
Fits in the picture that I have of him formed in my mind. Yeah.
Because, like, they took all of Grace's letters from his rented lodging, but they didn't have a search warrant for it. So it's that sort of thing. Like, they got him fair and square. Like, those were the letters that she sent him, but maybe they didn't play exactly by the rules. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
And I should note that I think that he also probably thought that there would be an appeal that would set him free. And so I think also there's the element of just not writing anything down because he knew the guards were reading his journal anytime they wanted, right? It's not like this journal was private in any way. So some people make a big deal out of how he never admits anything in the journal and he's really very witty and funny and this and that. Well, I'm like, well, of course he is.
We know these kind of journals are often so manipulative.
So, on March 30th, 1908, Chester Gillette died in the electric chair at the Auburn Correctional Facility. It appears that this is going to make everyone feel better, I think. From what I've read, and someone might know more, but it does appear that he confessed to the religious, I want to say priest, but I don't know whether it was a priest or a pastor. But, you know, there's a clergyman that's assigned to you when you're on death row, right? And so after his execution, they did confirm, the religious clergy who were with him, they did confirm that he confessed to murdering her. But they refused to give any details of his confession because of the confidentiality of confession. He confessed to murdering her. This is all just and fair, but we can't tell you any of the specifics. It was sort of that kind of thing. Yeah. And speaking of the execution, Auburn Prison has quite a history. I think I'm going to be doing some more cases from there. It's where those black and white striped prisoner uniforms were first used, and it was the first prison with the electric chair. And I did find out on our list is the first electric chair execution. One day we'll tell that story. But as for Chester, it seems like he went in calmly. He said that he felt he was saved and he'd made good with God, which would have been very important to his family. And apparently they only had to hit him once with the electricity, and that was that. And he was buried in an unmarked grave at Soul Cemetery, which was nearby, and there were only family in attendance. Most people think that where he is buried, there's now like a road that goes over it because it's unmarked. I feel bad for his family because the gravestone isn't really for the person who died, it's for the survivors, but it is what it is. Grace, who we really care about, she was laid to rest in the family plot. And after her murder, the family moved again. I believe the entire family moved again. It was just too many painful memories. And I think that the reason I wanted to read that letter was just that very bittersweet her saying goodbye to the place that she loved, you know, and where she had sort of grown up. But there's some question now as to whether or not Grace is resting. There are reports around Big Moose Lake. People who visit the area have felt a presence of some kind. Several people have reported that they feel that they are not alone. Like they feel very much someone is standing very near them. And also they feel with that feeling, so they feel that someone is right with them, and then they feel this overwhelming feeling of sadness. And then it just all passes. And they believe that that is the spirit of Grace. Even more intriguing is that more than one person has reported seeing an actual full-bodied apparition of Grace in the area. And she's seen sort of gazing out at the lake from the shore. Also, they report seeing her apparition on the lake as she's drowning. I can't even imagine how that must be. She's also been seen in buildings that didn't exist yet when she died. So, like, people have been staying in places on lodges on the lake and have seen her, even though the lodge was built after the murder. But these reports, they've been coming in steadily for over 100 years. And I think it's hard to know. Is it just people know the story, or is she there? If she's there, I hope it's a residual haunting. It sounds like it because she never interacts with anyone, but it certainly sounds like people around this really beautiful place that was the spot of just such a horrific event have experienced something they can't explain. And that is the story of the murder of Grace Mae Brown, also known as Billy Brown, also known as the Kid, who was just another bright, funny, loving, beloved young woman who was murdered for being pregnant. And I know some of you are like, oh, murder for being pregnant. Don't forget that homicide is the most common cause of death for pregnant women in the United States. It's just so sad. It's
very sad.
Very sad. We have so many stories of women. I think also a lot of people compare this case to the Lacey Peterson case. It's just really sad. Yeah. How about something good? Do you have anything good?
I have a recommendation. I started to watch 9 Perfect Strangers. That's the new show on Amazon Prime with Nicole Kidman.
Yes, how is it?
I really enjoy it. It's based on the book 9 Perfect Strangers by Leanne Moriarty, I think is her name. She also wrote Big Little Lies.
Oh, okay.
And I really started to, you can't binge the show because there's just 5 episodes out. So the episodes come out weekly, which, really, 2021.
I know. It makes me feel like a kid again. It's like, ooh, it's Friday night. New Ted Lasso tonight.
Yeah. No, but I bought the audiobook because nowadays I don't have time to read.
Yeah.
So I take the time while driving to listen to audiobooks mostly. And it's also, the book is really, really good, really entertaining. I think I enjoy her books so far. It's
nice.
It's, yeah, nice and entertaining.
Good. Yeah, I really like a lot of the cast in that. I want to see it. It's on my list. So thank you for the reminder.
Yeah, it's Melissa McCarthy's in it.
I love her. Yeah, mine is, I'm actually really excited for this weekend. My old college roommate from my freshman year of college is coming down to visit me from Maine. And I haven't seen her in, oh my goodness, we were overdue before COVID. So it has been like 3 years since I've seen her, and she's one of my closest friends. She and Moose and Paul and I are going to see our second rescheduled COVID event, which is a concert at Great Woods, which is like it's called something else now, but if you live in Massachusetts, it's always Great Woods. It's like an outdoor amphitheater sort of venue. And we're going to see Alanis Morissette and Garbage. I'm really excited, and I'm really excited for Moose because the first time I went to see Alanis, Moose was supposed to come with me, and she got really sick, and so my friend Mike came with me instead, and that was a great show. That was the first Jagged Little Pill tour, and Radiohead opened for her, but Moose missed it. And then the second time I took Moose, I actually won tickets and took Moose to like a Christmas concert at our TD Garden, which is like another concert venue, sport venue. And it was such a good show. It was like the Cranberries, Coldplay, Alanis, and the Bare Naked Ladies. It was a great show, but Alanis had really bad laryngitis, so everyone else played her songs, and she was just there sort of playing some instruments. So this is third time's the charm. Keep your toes crossed and fingers that Moose finally gets to hear Alanis Morissette.
It's gonna be great.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. It's gonna be nice. It's gonna be nice. We actually have a couple of quick shout outs. We want to send a quick shout out to our group moderator, Tammy, and let her know we are thinking of her. She is going through a particularly tough struggle right now. And also, we want to send a shout out to Autumn. Thank you so much. She really made our day. Thank you. Do you want to tell them everything else so they don't have to listen to me anymore?
If you are interested in ways how to get in contact with us via email or via our PO box, please go to our website, freshhellpodcast.com. There you find all the links. You find a link to our merch store. You find a link to our Instagram. You find a link to our Facebook group, which is an awesome group, and we're still growing constantly. You find a link to our Patreon. You can also go to Patreon directly and search for Fresh Hell. We pop right up. There you see all the tiers and what we offer. We're gonna do another makeup video soon, and game night is coming up, and it's fun. It's really fun. I think that's it. Tell your pets we said hi. Tell them we miss them. Hug them, cuddle them. They are the best pets out there.
Absolutely.
All of the pets are the best pets. Let's not kid ourselves. And don't forget, do not only treat your pets kindly, also treat your fellow human beings kindly and give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
At least once. Yeah. And as always, if you yourself are going through hell,
keep going. Tschüss.
Bye. Everybody stay safe out there.
On one summer's day, sun was shining fine. The lady love of old Bill Bailey was hanging clothes on the line in her backyard, and a weeping hard. She married a B&O brakeman that took and throwed her down, bellering like a prune-fed calf with a big gang hanging around. And to that crowd, she yelled out loud, won't you come home, Bill Bailey, won't you come home? She moans the whole day long. I'll do the cooking, darling, I'll pay the rent. I knows I've done you wrong. Remember that rainy evening I drove you out with nothing but a fine-tooth comb. I knows I'll to blame. Well, ain't that a shame? Bill Bailey, won't you please come home? Bill drove by that door in an automobile, a great big diamond coach and footman. Hear that big winch squeal, he's all alone. I heard her groan. She hollered through that door, Bill Bailey, is you sore? Stop a minute, won't you listen to me? Won't I see you no more? Bill winked his eye as he heard her cry. Won't you come home, Bill Bailey, won't you come home? She moans the whole day long. I'll do the cooking, darling, I'll pay the rent. I knows I've done you wrong. Remember that rainy evening I drove you out with nothing but a fine-tooth comb. I knows I was to blame. Well, ain't that a shame? Bill Bailey, won't you please come home?